Skyrim. Whether you've sunk hundreds of hours in the game, or you've barely even scratched the surface, it's a game that made huge waves within the culture of gaming. Almost anyone you ask has at least heard of Skyrim, and may have opinions on it. Skyrim's popularity was like a bridge for gaming communities. Whether you were the FPS player, MMO person, or even someone who barely gamed, you've heard or played Skyrim. But why is that? Is it a masterpiece in storytelling? Were the mechanics truly revolutionary in 2011? So good, in fact, that it was still revolutionary in 2013 and again in 2016? Was there just so much packed into one game that everyone who played found some sort of enjoyment? From the little things as creating simple memories or doing hard challenge runs that people were impressed with? Well, actually, kind of yeah, but also not really. You see, The Elder Scrolls Skyrim may not have been the writing excellence of Tolkien or Robert Jordan's Wheel of Time. It's certainly been outclassed in mechanics and functions since its release by numerous games since 2011. But there are also a ton of open-world role-playing games that are just filled to the brim with things to explore. Skyrim just hits differently. I find that it isn't the best in every single category, but instead it's just above average in most regards. Except story? When people think of Skyrim today, most people think of fun side adventures they and their friends went on, finding weird beasts and creating fond memories of those moments, or possibly finding powerful items and abilities and becoming an unkillable juggernaut in their power fantasy. But a general consensus is the main story of Skyrim is pretty, well, bland. It's not remembered well among players and RPG enjoyers as being solid. But why is that? If Skyrim's so great of a game to be released multiple times over a decade, how come the story is always the last thing mentioned or even looked down upon? Hey everyone, and welcome to Game Narrative. Today, we'll be going through The Elder Scrolls Skyrim's main story. However, I do want to clear up exactly what we'll be focusing on today, since, as previously mentioned, Skyrim is a pretty big game with a lot to cover, so let's set some ground rules. First, we'll only be looking at the main story and the progression of the main path. We won't be diving into any of the guild storylines or side quests like Daedric Princes and things like that, unless they intersect with the main story. Esbern. Second, we're not going to be covering the wider world of Tamriel and the deep lore surrounding all the territories, the history, the land, including events of the previous games, unless it intersects with the main story and it's brought up in Skyrim as knowledge the players would have been told through the quests. Blades. But aside from that, that pretty much covers it. That's all the baseline. So what are we actually going to be talking about with the main story? Well, this kind of breaks down into two different parts. First, we have narrative design, and then we have story and writing. We'll be breaking up the story into parts. In each part, we'll go through the main story beats. After the short story recap, I'll give my opinions from a writing and design point of view. The design side is more how I feel the story is being delivered and received. Is it good from a game design point of view? Was this a good decision? Or even, what could they have done better? This should give a nice refresher for anyone who may forget some things and help me organize my thoughts while I write all this out. But before jumping right into it, if you enjoy this type of content, try hitting the like button. If you agree or disagree to some of my points, or just think I'm unhinged, leave a comment. You've all heard the YouTuber spiel before, so without further ado, let's get into it.
Finally awake.
Bound on a wagon heading to the unknown, surrounded by unfamiliar faces. One appears to be welcoming, another unnerved, and the last bounding gagged. Just the way we like it. I mean, it's revealed that the one gagged is a prominent figure, the Jarl of Windhelm. The unnerved one blames him for the recent troubles, and we continue down the path to our unceremonious execution, when we're greeted with a dragon, swooping down and landing on the tower at the most convenient of times. Using the distraction of the dragon, we scramble through the village as it falls to ruin, reuniting with our would-be executioner and new wagon friend, where we choose one based off vibes and make our way through the tutorial. It's a pretty standard trope of being a prisoner, especially in the Elder Scrolls. I'm kind of of two minds here. One, I like the flexibility for creating our own backstory and how we ended up here, but it's fairly narrow in scope, as no matter what we come up with, we're always a prisoner. I also like how they used Ralof and Ulfric to dip our toes into the central conflict going on in Skyrim at the time of our arrival. It's not a massive info dump and tries harder to evoke some sentimental feelings with Ralof, with him recounting earlier years of his youth and the girl that makes mead, but overall, this introduction helps with a lot of the general explanation. Things like why we have no gear, and also it's just a convenient way of opening up a game that's a classes system like Skyrim. It can be pretty clunky, and it does draw on a little too long for my taste, and the taste of many others, but similar to a new campaign of Dungeons & Dragons, prisoner tropes are common to give a group of people a goal to work together, something to accomplish. The main thing I don't like about this is that because we start in the cart with Stormcloaks, it feels like the game is failing to subtly push us to that faction. It would be awesome to be able to choose a side from the get-go, depending on like a background you choose or perhaps your race. Like if you chose an Imperial, you could be a soldier working for the Imperials and you see the other side of the wagon coming down with Ulfric. I mean, just small things like that would really build a lot to the game, and I mean, it's clearly there. I mean, the modding community, one of the best mods of all time, is start as something else. So, but either way, overall, I think the introduction's fine, especially for first-time players. It gives them a bit of info on current events, civil wars, factions, shows the strength of the dragon and that they're a new threat that no one is accustomed to, and it gives you a bit of freedom and choice. Since it's also the prologue, I'm not completely against not being able to move freely and are instead guided, since for new players that will be learning the controls, it's kind of like a gymnastics course of running through burning Helgen, and that's fine. After surviving the burning of Helgen, the dragon flies north, towards more prominent cities in the region. We follow our brand new traveling compartment, whether that's a would-be executioner or a wagon friend, to the town of Riverwood, where we're told the Jarl of Whiterun needs to know of the imminent danger. Also, here's my entire inventory of supplies if you want that. So we take it, and we carry on our wayward son north to the city of Whiterun, where we're allowed entry just because we may know something related to dragons. Who knows? Upon interacting with Jarl Balgruuf, we learn more about the recent threat of dragons, and they haven't been around for hundreds of years. With our first-hand account, we're more believed about the impending threat. We're tasked with assisting the court wizard Farengar, collecting an ancient tablet called the Dragonstone from Bleak Falls Burrow back towards Riverwood. Backtracking to Riverwood won't get tedious, right? Now, I'm not going to go over every dungeon in full detail, as they're mostly just fighting through Draugr, solving elementary school puzzles, and staring at a wall until you hear chanting. If something notable to the story and narrative design happens within these dungeons, I'll talk more about those, but in the meantime, in Bleak Falls Burrow, it ties together the idea that dragons are ancient enemies, as the dungeon is old, the crumbling of foundation, the burial methods, the ancient armor and weapons Draugr use, and even the old carvings and inscriptions in the stone. But other than that, there isn't much else to talk about here for our purposes. So, we collect the Dragonstone and return to Farengar, where after our timely delivery, we're interrupted by reports that a dragon has assaulted a watchtower outside of Whiterun. We're sent with Jarl Balgruuf's personal bodyguard Irla to find more information, and lo and behold, we encounter the dragon that attacked the watchtower and do battle. As we strike down the beast, it speaks Dovahkiin no as we consume its power. The guards stand in awe as legends come to life in front of their eyes, and we're told we're the Dragonborn. Crazy, right? As we make our way back to Whiterun, the earth shakes and the skies part as ancient words ring out. According to Jarl Balgruuf, we've been summoned to High Hrothgar, home of an ancient lineage known as the Greybeards. Very creative names. Anyway, they live near the peak of the mountain, with Whiterun momentarily safe. We set off to answer the call of the Greybeards. Now, for the design part, overall I'm actually really okay with everything we've been put through in the beginning. I mean, it follows a logical path. We're slowly growing in power, we're learning new skills, exposition is being filled pretty well, and we're not being sat down for 15 minutes while someone just talks at us forever. The story's purpose gets us to interact with the wider world, and as we discover more about the ancient Nord people, dragons coming back, and Jarl Bolgraf's willingness to look after his people at the conflict, it does a good job of not dumping unnecessary information on us. It feels immersive and brings us into the greater conflict of Skyrim. The dungeon does a great job of being extended tutorial with plenty of enemies, very basic puzzles, and nice design that feels rewarding for completing. The immediate fight with the dragon at the watchtower is great too. I mean, recovering the stone shows we're capable of handling ourselves, and then we get to dig into the main story conflict immediately. It just throws us in there. That's awesome. The destination itself isn't even a far walk if undiscovered, and the fight is pretty cinematic. I mean, as the dragon flies in from the mountains and the guards are yelling to get down, it all just kind of fits very well. And even with the death of the dragon and absorbing its soul, it feels good and translates well to the story. The guardsmen just stare in awe and are just like, holy shit, a legend is being born. And this is also the point where I think most people call it good on the main story. Now that they've unlocked the Dragonborn powers, dragons are out and about in the world, and their next destination being a bit of a journey to the third of the world just kind of opens up, so they go up to explore and find side quests and interact with the world. With a game like Skyrim being so massive, I think it's a good decision, as there's a lull in the narrative until we meet our next important figures. Alright, part 3. This is where the pain starts.
So it begins.
We make our way to High Hrothgar, up the 7,000 steps, home of the Greybeards. At first, they're weary of the rumors of the Dragonborn, but it's quickly dismissed as we show our prowess, our sweet Thuum, after defeating a dragon and absorbing its power. They grant us mastery over a new Thuum and send us on a trial, to not only prove we're the Dragonborn, but also as an introduction into the way of the voice. We must collect the horn of Jurgen Windcaller from the depths of Ustengrav, far in the north. We make our way through Ustengrav, utilizing the new Thuum bestowed to us by the Greybeards. We approach the resting place of the horn as pillars rise from the water as praise for our accomplishment of completing the task, only to find a note? A mysterious stranger, only known as D, has absconded with the horn and tells us to meet them at Riverwood End? Don't worry, I have plenty of thoughts on this. Anyway. From the ruins of Ustengrav, we travel back to our old stomping grounds of Riverwood, to the end where we were informed of. We do as the note suggests and ask for the attic room, only to be told the room doesn't exist and we can have this normal one. Once inside, the bar owner Delphine confronts us. Delphine? D? Coincidence? Skeptical we're the Dragonborn, she gives us the horn anyway. She tells us to prove we're the Dragonborn. Again. Okay. And she knows where the next dragon's gonna be at. Alright, but first, didn't we just prove we're the Dragonborn by doing the... Well, never mind. Apparently anyone can just get the horn or whatever. We follow the so mysterious Delphine to where she believes the next dragon will arise, and we find the great worm that attacked Helgen. It begins to raise another dragon from the grave. The dragon knows we are the Dragonborn and peers right at us, even attempting to communicate in the tongue of dragons, only for him to recognize we don't know the language, thinking us basically as like newborns. He sets the raised dragon against us and flies away. After defeating the dragon, Delphine is finally convinced we are the Dragonborn and is willing to answer all of our questions. She reveals she's the last living member of the Blades, an organization originally established to hunt dragons and protect the Emperor Septim bloodline. But after the death of the last Septim during the events of the Oblivion Crisis, sorry, never mind. She just says 200 years ago. The Blades lost their purpose. Delphine immediately jumps to the conclusion that the Thalmor are behind the dragons. Her reason being, well, I don't like them and they're bad guys. Side note here, by this point in the main story, we've only seen the Thalmor once in the prologue, where they were speaking to General Tullius before Ulfric's execution. A perfectly reasonable explanation for being in the vicinity in general. Anyway, now you can also return the horn to Arngir for a pat in the ass and a good job, and then you just get shouted at by old men and learn the last word of your unrelenting force shout. Anyways, to find out more about the Thalmor's involvement, we're sent to infiltrate a party at the Thalmor embassy. With a less than half-baked plan based purely on bias against a race of people, we're sent in to infiltrate the embassy. We meet Elenwen, ambassador to Skyrim from the Thalmor and Aldemiri Dominion. She's not really important, kind of, but no, not really. We cause a distraction, then slaughter some 15 elves, or sneak past if that's your motive, to a prison cell, where we find some documents on some dude named Esbern, apparently a member of the Blades in hiding that may know more about the dragon's appearance. Whether you sneak or committed small-scale genocide, your guy on the inside Malborn is caught, and you have to flee. Returning to Delphine to tell her that the Thalmor aren't involved, but some guy named Esbern might know more. Okay, this is where the game starts to get a bit hairy, and not in the good way. There are so many things to unpack, so let's just start from the beginning. The Greybeards. Story-wise, they're an info-dumping exposition machine. You stand there and are told all this old wisdom about the way of the voice, but nothing of too much actual substance or anything relating to current events. You're then forced to use a mechanic with a cooldown, then just sit and wait and do it again, and then again, for 3 times because they really want to make sure you know how to do it. And everything is just so slow and it feels like it's dragging on. From learning the improved shout to demonstrating you can use whirlwind sprint, it really takes you out of the moment. Instead of role-playing, you're getting talked to like a player, which is the exact opposite thing we want in role-playing games. It could have been handled in a much better situation. For instance, and this is just my imagination here, but what if instead of all this, we just had a short blurb about the Greybeards, how they do believe you're the Dragonborn, but there is one final trial to grab the horn from Ustengrav. Then they'd be willing to teach you more about the voice and their ways as kind of an introduction. And if you are truly the Dragonborn, then the way will be open to you. You would then travel to Ustengrav, and there were word walls that would teach you the whirlwind sprint to pass the puzzles, maybe another using unrelenting shout to break a wall or something to reveal the horn. Something active that still teaches the player or could even be found before going to the Greybeards. I mean, like, similar to Bleak Falls Barrow, we can go grab that stone anytime we want. But this would imply the horn was actually there, which leads me into more frustration. Delphine certainly is something. I was going to say a character, but that would imply depth. Since we're already talking about the horn, why? Why have her steal an object only someone who can use the voice obtain? Why not just meet us at the entrance? She could say she followed us and wanted to see if we succeeded. Then she would give off a way better mystery vibe by telling us, I think I know where the next dragon will be, meet me here if you want to know the truth. Instead, we're not given an explanation and just have to believe she no-clipped through the wall and to yoink the horn because teehee random mystery. I mean, overall, it's just, the execution just does not line up at all. And even when we return to the inn in Riverwood, she still has an air of superiority and a general just asshole vibe that immediately turns me off from wanting to learn more about her. Additionally, all this backtracking to Riverwood does not feel good. It's much more back and forth feeling instead of feeling of progression, which can get really tedious. Aside from Delphine's glaring hole where a character could be, why do we have to prove we're the Dragonborn again? This would be the 4th time, I believe? If she's been following our movements and that of the Greybeards to know to steal the horn, she should have instead phrased it more like she has a theory on the appearance of the dragons, and she wants our help since we have experience. Instead, it comes off as talking down to us and a do-it bitch conversation to go kill a dragon. But ignoring Delphine, I do like this part. Showing that the dragons aren't just appearing and are instead being revived by the dragon who attacked Helgen, we find they can communicate and know our language, and it's just immediately ruined by Delphine after killing the dragon. Everything else about it, awesome. If she was just not a part of this entire section, much better gameplay. The immediate jump to blaming the Thalmor for literal fucking dragons is wild. Like, flat earth tinfoil on head shit. By this point, in the main story, the Thalmor have done literally nothing except be present at Ulfric's capture and execution. And Delphine has been nothing but obnoxious at this point, so the fact we go along with it by force is also just kind of wild. If you talk more to Delphine, she does explain kind of why she doesn't like the Thalmor and the whole Aldemiri Dominion killing them off in a great war, but It's vague. That sounds more like bad war strategy and planning than purposeful eradication by the Thalmor. I mean, if you can dive deeper into it, and it is interesting, and it does kind of give more credence to why she hates the Thalmor, but this isn't explained in the actual story that we've learned so far, so I'm not including it. Anyway, who guessed it? We're sent on a terrible plan made by the last Blades member to infiltrate the Thalmor. Not only are there no real consequences for decimating an entire fort of people, but the entire plan is bad. Delphine is just assuming they're behind dragons, and the whole mission is IDK find something, Lamau. But by divine intervention of Todd Howard, we find they know about another Blades member named Esbern and where he's at. Delphine's reaction just blows me away to this information. Esbern, one of the Blades that was obsessed with dragons, knew all the ancient lore and history, could prove useful in the reappearance of the dragons, and she didn't know he was alive? Well, if you knew him well, which she does, the dragons showing up, wouldn't it make sense to look into him? Maybe find out how and where he died and where any of his information ended up? I mean, she also personally knows Brynjolf in the Thieves Guild, who happily shares there's an old guy in the sewers that pays him money. Instead of raiding the Thalmor embassy based on a hunch, it would have been way better to have a more subtle quest line that follows old fragments of Esbern to learn he's alive. Then, as you're leaving with him, battle the Thalmor as you flee the Ratway. Alright, sorry, I got a little carried away. It's just, Delphine is written so bad and is an oxymoron to the Blades as a whole. And unfortunately, she still does stupid shit later on, but for the most part becomes irrelevant to the main story once we get Esbern, a character with an actual brain. As a whole, all of part 3 just feels slow. It feels tedious. It leaves a ton of logical fallacies, and the characters just kind of suck. At least in part 2, Barlgrulf was interesting, stuck in the middle of a civil war, weighing his choices, the potential fallout of his people, and trying to figure out a way to protect them from an emerging threat. Anyway, I digress. On to part 4. We travel to Ripton, the last known location of Esbern. In the town square, we're accosted by a weirdly confident man staring at our sack of gold. He tells us we have to do a job to get more information about the person we're looking for. We finish his task and he tells us, yep, there's an old guy hiding next to the Thieves Guild. Oh, but he pays us good money not to talk about it. That's literally the quest. That's all the information he gives you, and then your quest log updates. Okay, so we travel down past a couple of dorks in the Thieves Guild and their clearly up to code health inspection certified sewer bar to find Esbern behind some locks. We convince him we're friends and to come back to Riverwood with us. Yay, Riverwood. As we're leaving, Brynjolf must have let slip to the Thalmor that the old guy that pays them money to stay quiet is down in the Thieves Guild, or at least next to the Thieves Guild. I mean, they also had to walk through the secret sewer bar too to get to the Ratway, right? Anyway, we end up finding our way out and head back to Riverwood with Esbern in tow. When we arrive, Esbern begins divulging information about the dragons and this dragon wall and Skyhaven Temple, an old sanctuary the Blades used to occupy. Delphine, who previously said Esbern is a genius, starts calling Esbern an idiot and to stop making up conspiracy theories because obviously the Thalmor are behind the dragons. But anyway, we head to the ruins near Markarth, currently under the protection of the Forsworn. Who are the Forsworn? Doesn't matter, not part of the main story, don't worry about it. They're guarding some puzzle bridges and a big ol' head. We cut our hands and find entry into the old Blades hideout. Esbern reveals the Dragon Wall, an ancient prophecy showing the Dragonborn of old defeating Alduin. He's returned, and in order for us to defeat him as the prophecy foretells, we must learn the shout Dragonrend, the same shout used by the ancient Dragonborn. Since there's only one group of people who would know about the shout, we travel back to Arngir and the Greybeards. So we head back to High Hrothgar, talking to Arngir, who tells us that he doesn't know the shout, and to talk to Parthenax. Maybe he knows. Parthenax turns out to be the leader of the Greybeards, who resides on the top of the mountain away in seclusion. And with probably the best twist/reveal in this game, Parthenax turns out to be an ancient dragon. He's calm and wise. He tells us Dragonrune was created by mortals to defeat Alduin originally. He doesn't know the shout per se, but he claims the ancient Nords used an Elder Scroll so they could defeat Alduin along with the Dragonrend shout. So perhaps we could use the same Elder Scroll to go back in time and learn a little bit about the shout, and those would be the only people who would know about it. He gives us a good kicking off point at the College of Winterhold, and maybe someone there knows where an Elder Scroll is. So all in all, for part 4, I'm actually not super opposed to this part. I actually like tying in the guilds to the main story and give players a little bit more to explore and do. Except, I do find this one kind of weird with the Thieves Guild. It's just implied that Delphine knows Brynjolf, and we're not there to join the Thieves Guild. So making my magic using character do a stealthy mission just to tell me an old guy lives in the sewers feels off. I think it would be better if to be sent to talk to Brynjolf for information and saying we're mutual friends with Delphine, or even later on when we do the College of Winterhold side, we tell him, hey, I'm actually the Dragonborn, so that info would be awesome. And then Brynjolf could be like, all right, here's the information you want since you're Dragonborn or you know Delphine. Also, if you want to know how to make some money doing some unsavory things, let me know. I mean, that would feel a lot better to me than being like, hey, yeah, you're forced to do this thing and frame this guy just to tell me an old guy lives in the sewers. As for Esbern hiding out in the Ratway by the Thieves Guild, it's a pretty decent idea. I mean, it's executed partially well, aside from Brynjolf spouting off about his existence to everyone. Although the Thalmor attacking inside the Ratway doesn't make the most sense. After all, they'd have to walk through the sewer bar area, which I guess the Thieves Guild wouldn't mess with them, but simultaneously feels off. I feel like it would make more sense for them to be in the sewer before the bar area, since their information pointed vaguely in that location, and if they're trying to establish order in Skyrim, I feel like them walking to the Thieves Guild hangout wouldn't end pleasantly for anyone. When we make our way back to Riverwood again, Delphine just continues to be useless and talks down to Esbern. After telling us he knows everything there is to know about dragons and the blades, here is actually where I think Esbern isn't a bad character. He sticks to fairly relevant plot devices and locations, how it interacts with the current events, and doesn't immediately know all the answers. He offers sound suggestions of when and where we can get information based on sources and texts he read in the past. As for the Ancient Blades hideout, it's pretty cool and cinematic. We learn about Alduin and the Ancient Prophecy, again, all information relevant to the plot. I feel like it doesn't drag on too long, and the aesthetics are on point, and we actually get information on something to help us on this quest. Additionally, it helps we can actually move around and interact with the environment as Esbern's talking about the prophecy, so points all around for that. After that, it's probably the best time for the Greybeards and Arngeir, as he doesn't actually ramble on for too long about Dragonrend, instead sending us to his master Parthenex, which is just an awesome reveal. Party Snacks, as he's lovingly known, is a great character. He's not judgmental or trying to force the player into a stupid path. He makes the player think more about the world and their place in it, and gives solid information on Alduin and how he was defeated, and also just where to start looking for Dragonrend. Like, Arngeir got all pissy when we mentioned Dragonrend as if we knew what we were talking about, but Parthenex is like, oh yeah, okay, I know, I see where you're coming from. Let's look at that. But yeah, I think if Delphine was killed off by the Thalmor before we found Esbern, and Brynjolf didn't make us do an irrelevant task while we're in a hurry, I'd say this part has been pretty solid. Alright, part 5. We travel to the College of Winterhold, where we have to convince the bridge troll we're magic enough. After we answer her questions 3, we make our way to the Arcanum to find a very knowledgeable orc. All our dialogue options here are pretty bad, and he calls us out on a great job, Arag. He tells us there's a madman somewhere in the Ice Waste north of the college who may know where an Elder Scroll is. But basically that's about it. He gives us some books. He tells us the books aren't going to help. We read the books anyway. You know. Anyway, we find Septimus mad at his gourd talking about transcribing the Elder Scrolls, how they're both near and far, past, present, and future. He then willingly hands over an artifact that will help us transcribe or open up the Elder Scroll that's deep within the city of Blackreach, a lost city underground. So, Off we go, diving into the Dwemer ruins. Again, I don't have much of a narrative or story reason to cover this area, but this zone always impressed me aesthetically with the giant caverns, weird flora, the descendants of the snow elves and Dwemer machinery. Anyway, we spam the shit out of the buttons and the Elder Scroll pops out. We take the Elder Scroll back to the Throat of the World and open its contents per Parthenax's instructions. We're given a vision of the ancient Nord heroes and their rebellion against Alduin, and the day he was sent to our timeline. Learning the Dragonrend shout and seeing the heroes try and fail to defeat Alduin by normal methods. We're then sucked back to our present time with Alduin floating menacingly, telling us we're too late and he's fed plenty. Our time is nigh. So we kick the shit out of Alduin with the aid of Parthenax using the newly discovered Dragonrend shout. It brings him to the ground for a little bit and makes it more convenient to fight dragons. Although we near his end, he flees. To where? Who knows? I mean, we just learned his name canonically a few hours ago, thanks to a picture on a wall. Parthenax also doesn't know where he could have gone, but perhaps we could trap a dragon that's loyal to Alduin, using the dragon trapping device built within Whiterun? Alright, beginning at the very beginning of part 5, again we see Skyrim trying to tie the main story in with guilds and holds in the region, taking us to Winterhold and the college. I think this one is done much better, because we don't have to interface with the guild at all, or even perform magic. Instead, we just have access to special dialogue and we tell the bridge lady, yeah, no, we're the Dragonborn, and we shout and she lets us in. Why couldn't we do something similar with the Thieves Guild? I did mention this earlier when I was talking about Brynjolf and how we could, maybe make it a little bit better, but that's already been covered. So, on to my favorite librarian, Urag Groshub. The librarian is a great side NPC, straight to the point, rejects poor dialogue options given to the Dragonborn, and gives you the books. Tells you before we even read them it's not really what you're looking for, but knock yourself out. Then tells you about Septimus the Mad Mage, who does know something. Not fully necessary, but great for people who maybe aren't aware of what the Elder Scrolls are, as they can explore kind of more of the dialogue options and kind of get a feel. But anyone who has played Elder Scroll games before or has done a little bit of deep dives or learning of the lore, you just feel like a complete dummy when you're using these options. And I would prefer if there were options for both experienced players, people who've played the game before, and new players that maybe don't make you feel as dumb, but because Urag just tells us it's a nice side relief. I also like Septimus. I mean, he's driven mad by his devotion to solving the unknown. He doesn't even realize he's doing the bidding of a Daedric prince, to the point where he finds the Elder Scrolls as meh, but have you seen this box? He willingly gives over what we need and tells us where one might be. No irrelevant side quests, no proving we're the Dragonborn. He's living in his own world, and I respect that. I already mentioned my thoughts on the Dwemer Ruin and Blackreach, so we'll skip that and go straight to the reading the Elder Scroll. No one wants to play a role-playing game and just be a passive viewer for minutes on end. It's such an epic scene, and we just watch through the blurred screen with shit all over it. No, man, the Elder Scrolls are incomprehensible, powerful, and super unique artifacts that we don't really know what they do. Every single one could be different. There's just so much wasted potential in this part. Imagine instead of standing there, watching 3 random people we don't know anything about fail, we're given free movement. We're sent back to ancient Ivarstead at the base of the mountain. We meet the heroes of old, actually giving them a chance to become anything relevant at all, and they teach us the Dragonrend shout from there, as they see we are Dragonborn. With our new companions, we would then assault the Throat of the World, cutting down dragons using Dragonrend shout to learn the new ability and how it works. Your allies help you all the way up as you slaughter your way up the 7,000 steps. Alduin gets more aggressive and begins speaking to the party as you make your way up, revealing more of his side and his beliefs and kind of why he's a villain, just kind of getting that edge. And then we're just like insects to him, and we just defy him all the way up to the Throat of the World, where then he flies down, slaying the companions we've kind of united with in this moment. And it's just you, the Nord hero mage guy, and he's all like, I've got no choice, but I must, in an anime voice, and uses the Elder Scroll. Then that launches you back to your timeline with Alduin hovering menacingly, finally recognize you as being there and tamper with the timelines of the Elder Scroll. I mean, alright, I digress, but I just came up with that whole section while writing the script, and personally it's infinitely more cool, enjoyable, better character development, grabs and holds your attention, instead of this weird half-baked cutscene where you can look around and it's really disappointing. Yeah, we get no information on the three main heroes. They're not even mentioned in any dialogue surrounding the main story. The only thing we know of Alduin is he eat good and he's bad guy. The story isn't even bad here. It's actually a cool concept, but the execution and narrative design is just, it's pure ass, man. So with the disappointment of the previous scene behind us, let's just jump into part 6 where everyone loves meetings. We hit up our old pal Jarl Balgruuf saying, "Yo, we need to put a bad dragon in your back door." And he's rightfully confused. He can't take the risk of an improvised plan to hold a dragon in his keep, especially while trying to maintain his borders caught up in a civil war. But if we could convince everyone to calm down for a minute, we can try it since we've earned his respect. Now, we have two ways of doing this. We can either kill hundreds of people from either side and do a series of quests until one side wins a civil war, or up to the point of Whiterun being attacked, basically. Or we can talk like grown-ups for a few minutes and do a call for a ceasefire, or else the world will end. I mean, shit. I prefer the killing hundreds of people bit, but we were told earlier that Alduin feeds on souls of the dead to gain power, so that doesn't sound like the most solid path. We decide to hash it out over a fire on top of a mountain. Traveling to Windhelm and Solitude respectively to convince the warmongers to chill for a minute and come talk with the Greybeards. We end up hashing the deets out of the ceasefire. Everyone is marginally okay with it, so Jarl Balgruuf lets us use the cage and the bad dragon when we get back to his place, which works surprisingly well. Wow, that never happens. Okay, cool. I mean, our new friend Odoving tells us all about Alduin and that he's in Sovngarde, feasting on dead people to regain power. Guess there's a good reason why I didn't kill all those people, but there's a way in. Only dragons can reach it. Don't think too hard about it, but he's the MacGuffin, so we go in or not. We decide we agree, and we climb on his back and ride that bad dragon hard to Skuldafn. Boy, you thought I had some thoughts on Delphine's character, but this part just... it sucks, man. You know, at least the shitty Elder Scroll time section had some narrative purpose and was at least interesting to watch, but man... watching these two giant babies shit their pants and complain about the other side just hurts, and it goes on for so long. I mean, look, I get they were trying to build some tension and meaningful consequences, that the Dragonborn's decisions on the region have effect and meaning, but everything just falls so flat. Instead of you actually making meaningful choices, they throw shit at each other for 5 minutes without making any actual points. If I wanted to see grown-ass adults talk about nothing except how the other one sucks for 30 minutes, I'd just turn on US presidential debates. Everything basically narrows down to Dragonborn, A or B, and remember, whatever you choose, I'll bitch about it for 5 minutes, but nothing will change anyway. You know what would have been way better? Just like a challenge of strength, an ancient Nord custom deriving from Sun, protector of the Hall of Heroes in Sovngarde. You choose a side you would represent to fight, and then you would just take on the other side's commander. The loser would agree to the ceasefire until the dragon situation is concluded or under control. And if you're neutral, I mean, fuck it, fight both at the same time. Who cares? Anything is better than just staring at people throw shit at each other for 5 minutes. I mean, it's not a perfect plan, but anything's better than this, man. Also, it's the prophesized end of the world, guys. I mean, come on. It just shows neither side care about the people they represent, and they have a weird hard-on for getting one over the other. Maybe Skyrim is an allegory for American politics. Ugh. Either way, back-to-back stinkers with the narrative design in the last two parts. At least capturing the dragon riding off in the sunset is pretty cool narratively and visually. Let's hope the battle with Alduin isn't disappointing. Off we fly to the lost ruins of Skuldafn, where no man could reach without wings. Wait, how do these Draugr and Buildingscape. Whatever. We're in too deep now. This climactic rush to the portal of the Sovngarde is awesome. Dragons swooping in, elite Draugr shouting and rushing to fight you, some shitty puzzles, and boom, we're at the top where we're confronted with the Dragon Priest, who seals the portal. We defeat them, reopening the portal to Sovngarde and diving in. Side note, this is the only Dragon Priest you have to fight in the main storyline. And they are pretty iconic characters. Anyway, Sovngarde is beautiful. Covered in a mist, we're told by a lost soul who lost conviction, the World Eater consumed those who ventured through the fog. So we walk through the fog and he tags along, only to get swooped up in classic horror style. Anyway, we finally reach the Hall of Heroes, where ancient Nords feast, where we must battle soon in a trial of strength to gain entry. We blast them in the face with our magic and we're let in. We find all the ancient heroes of old. We're greeted by the ancient hero Ysgramor himself, wielding the epic axe Wuthrad. Jurgen Windcaller tells us he's proud of the Greybeards following tradition. King Olaf One-Eye, first king of Whiterun, enjoys his food amongst the company of his friends. Oh, and those 3 nerds we saw in the Elder Scroll are hanging out waiting to talk to us. Alright, we talk to them. They're pumped to kill Alduin, and they're like, oh wait, we need a plan. Actually, no, let's just go out there and yell. So they do. We just run outside. We follow them. We stand with them against the fog, shouting away the clouds. Then shouting away the clouds again. And one last time. Oh, there he is. There's Alduin. He appeared now. Oh, wait, hold on. Wait for it. My cooldown's still up. Now we dragon rend him. And now we're able to fight him. The new climactic battle between us and the World Eater begins. Oh, wait, he's dead? Alright. So I guess my new friends / acquaintances just ganked the shit out of him. And that's it. Alright, well, Soon walks over to us and is like, nice. So, like, you can go now. And we just do that, only to appear at the throat of the world, surrounded by dragons, and Paarthurnax saying, Alduin has fallen, and dragons are free from his reign, and should follow him in the path of the voice and whatever. He also says, like, good job, I guess, and flies off. Okay. At least our bad dragon buddy, Odahviing, tells us not everyone will follow Mario, but whatevs. He'll answer our call should we use the dragon call shout, and that's it. That's the end of Skyrim. Now, I'm not just being anticlimactic for effect. That's just what happened, man. That's it. That's literally it. Wow. There is so much potential with Sovngarde. The old Nord heroes we've been hearing about through our travels. I mean, not us particularly, because we were focused on the main story. And all these kind of people are outside that we learn about them, or from books in the world, or songs that the bards sing, or the companions who worship Ysgramor himself. But that's what we get. That's the ending? Look, I mean, Alduin himself, he was just like a dragon that could call rocks. His death animation's neat, but like, yeah. I mean, you don't even get loot for killing Alduin. I'm not mad. I'm just disappointed. Our epic confrontation with the big bad, we get 3 randoms no one has ever heard of, and replay the same fight we did at the Watchtower in part 2, except now there's some rocks and we have a convenient way of getting him to land. It just doesn't feel right. Okay. It's a curveball, but listen to her a sec. Take Gwyn, Lord of Cinder from Dark Souls 1. Completely different game, but still, you enter the fog wall. The haunting music of Gwyn's theme starts to play, and he leaps into battle. Sure, mechanically, just parry him, bro, but that's not the point. The entire game, the entire lead up from the very beginning cinematic tells us about Gwyn. All these characters in this world reference Gwyn as like he's something amazing above and beyond, like what he did for the world and humanity and the gods, and how he's become hollow with nothing left, just an ember of what was to keep the flame alive. Seeing him and fighting him almost just feels wrong. You feel bad, and you understand he's this legendary figure. Alduin, on the other hand, I mean, man, we just learned your name a couple hours ago, bro. Like, it's complete night and day difference. I have no emotional ties to Alduin whatsoever. I don't see him as this big, horrifying monster. We kicked his ass on top of a mountain without nameless Nord heroes, right? He's just another dragon fight. There's nothing mechanically different, or there's no lead up to it. There's no dialogue. You can't speak to him beforehand. I mean, shit, Miraak is a better villain than the main bad guy of Elder Scrolls, and that's only a few hours of a journey. Delphine is a better villain than Alduin. The victory as a whole feels shallow and hollow. Let's just go ahead and get to the summary. Through my replaying of Skyrim, I think I finally found an answer to those questions I first posed. Skyrim's storyline has an amazing start. You hit the ground running, clearing Bleakfall's burrow and delivering the Dragonstone, to fending off a dragon and becoming the protector of Whiterun. Everything flows nice and evenly. There's not much backtracking. The story makes sense and you feel like you're progressing, unlocking new powers, and you branch out to explore. There you find memorable quests, events, NPCs, all throughout the lands of Skyrim. But then you go back to the main story, and it just feels like a chore, like something you have to do. The characters you're forced to interact with have no depth. They aren't interesting. The quests you're sent on are time-consuming and just tedious. They also just don't make sense a lot of the time. You don't actually get any answers to some of your questions from the time you escape the captivity in Helgen until you reach the Dragon Wall in Skyhaven Temple. Do you know how much? Yeah, you do know, actually. We just talked about it. There's a lot between then and there. And by then, you're just given all the info and exposition from Esbern. It's like, once you've hit that point, there is no more payoff. Instead, you're just forced to watch cutscenes back to back to back with irritating characters. You walk into Sovngarde, slap spooky Alduin, and then that's it. The most rewarding feeling you get from completing the storyline is you don't have to do it anymore. Your chores are done. I think the criticism of Skyrim's main storyline by the general public is fair. I'm not saying Skyrim is a bad game. In fact, just the opposite. There are so many good parts about the game, but all the great parts are in other places of the world. Stories, quests, NPCs that you just find through exploration. There was so much potential for the main quest to be truly epic, but the storyline ends in tedium, boredom, and disappointment. And really, there was just a lot of things they could have done. Like, we know there's a lot of great characters in Skyrim, but if the core of your game revolves around this story and this conflict, why have the worst written characters be the front people for it? So yeah, that's it. That's Skyrim. Something I would like to do on this channel is we're going to rate the games on a tier list. All the games we do are going into one large tier list. And to do that, we're going to give 4 primary categories a score out of 10. Take the average of those. Depending on the total score, that's what place in the tier list it lists. So let's start with the very first one. Overall story. Was the story good or enjoyable? Were there good flows to the progression? Did it make sense? The plot itself is fine. The beginning starts off really strong, but falls off fast. So I'm giving the story a 4 out of 10. Second, world building. Did the main story do a good job of building the world around the plot? Was I immersed and the world felt alive? Personally, I think the world building is solid. There's layers of history, factions, a bunch of different drives and goals between how everyone's working, and a lot of intermingling in story and history. Even if it isn't fully explored, there's a lot of it to feel like there's depth, especially even in just the main storyline. The parts of the central conflict of the Civil War fell flat, but overall, I'm still going to give it a 6 out of 10 for world building. Third, character development. Did the characters we met along the way grow, learn new lessons, have more profound impact on the story, become driving forces for completing our goals? No. No, they did not. Not in the slightest, in fact. Of all the characters we met along the way, there are only 2 standouts. That being Jarl Balgruuf and Parthenax, both of which don't have very many dialogue options, but both feel way more multidimensional and have weight of emotion behind them. They feel like actual characters. And I think the characters in Skyrim's main story are honestly the biggest detractors. I'm giving it a 1 out of 10 for character development. Last, we have player urgency. How do we impact the world around us? Do we feel like we're making good strides, growing in power, forging lasting relationships? How engaged in the story are we as the player? Are we immersed in it? Are we just zoning out? Are we alt-tabbing with something on the screen? So for this one on Skyrim, I'm going to have to say Skyrim did poorly. Again, amazing start, but everything just falls to a complete standstill. We don't feel like we're growing from the main story. The effects we have on the world aren't lasting, and our contribution to ending Alduin feels hollow, let alone all the waiting and just sitting there that we have to do while things happen around us. I'm giving player urgency a 3 out of 10 on this one. So with that brings our final score of Skyrim Story to a total of 14 out of 40, placing it firmly in D on our tier list. And with that answers the question, was Skyrim Story actually good? No, not really. Thanks everyone for watching. I hope you enjoyed the content. Let me know what you'd like to see in our next story deep dive. I'm thinking of doing Oblivion and Morrowind next, but I'm also itching to play some Dragon Age in preparation for the new Dreadwolf game coming out. So what are your thoughts on Skyrim Story also? Am I just completely unhinged? Am I just rambling here? Let me know. Thanks again to everyone who watched this. Game Narrative out.